Welcome back. This is part 2 of our workshop, the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., Nonviolence, and the Beloved Community. This is part 2. We hope you enjoyed the morning session, and we're happy to welcome back our workshop leader, Dr. Vincent Lewis. Vince, take it away.
Thank you, sir. We are about to watch the I Have a Dream address at the Lincoln Memorial again, and hopefully all of you are aware of that address. Maybe not many of us have heard the whole thing in its entirety, or it's been a while since we've heard it. So I think it's worth listening to again. While we are listening to it, I'd like for you to be prepared to respond to these 5 questions at the end. First of all, 50 years later, it's been 50 plus years later, after the I Have Dream address at the Lincoln Memorial, we as a society, are we as a society facing injustice today? Any injustice still going on in our society yet 50 years later? If so, what is it? Where is it? How does it look? Next question, who do you think needs to hear the I Have a Dream speech today? And the last thing I'd like for you to consider is, what are the 5 things that King visualized in his I Have a Dream address? Little known fact, in Dr. King's I Have a Dream address, his facts about and his statement about sharing his dream were not in his original notes, not in his original plan to present at the memorial. But things were going well, and one of his followers, one of his people, part of his crew, you could hear yelling from the back, "Tell him about the dream, Martin. Tell him about the dream, Martin." And you can barely hear it, and you don't hear it very well in this recording. I've heard it very well in other recordings, but you can see that he adds the dream part in and then reverts back to his original notes. But and it's interesting that because he added that in, it became the title of his address on this day and what he was very well known for. So we're going to listen to it again. We're going to come back to you regarding the questions that we'd like for you to respond to. And then we're going to talk about, what do you do after you dream about something? All right. So please sit tight, and we will proceed with the video.
I have the pleasure to present to you Dr. Martin Luther King, Jr.
I am happy to join with you today in what will go down in history as the greatest demonstration for freedom in the history of our nation. Five score years ago, a great American in whose symbolic shadow we stand today signed the Emancipation Proclamation. This momentous decree came as a great beacon light of hope to millions of Negro slaves who had been seared in the flames of withering injustice. It came as a joyous daybreak to end the long night of their captivity. But 100 years later, the Negro still is not free. 100 years later, the life of the Negro is still sadly crippled by the manacles of segregation and the chains of discrimination. 100 years later, the Negro lives on a lonely island of poverty in the midst of a vast ocean of material prosperity. This nation will rise up and live out the true meaning of its creed. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal. I have a dream that one day on the red hills of Georgia, the sons of former slaves and the sons of former slave owners will be able to sit down together at the table of brotherhood. I have a dream that one day, even the state of Mississippi, a state sweltering with the heat of injustice, sweltering with the heat of oppression, will be transformed into an oasis of freedom and justice. I have a dream that my 4 little children will one day live in a nation where they will not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. I have a dream today I have a dream that one day down in Alabama, with its vicious racists, with its governor having his lips dripping with the words of interposition and nullification, one day right there in Alabama, little black boys and black girls will be able to join hands with little white boys and white girls as sisters and brothers. I have a dream today I have a dream that one day every valley shall be exalted, and every hill and mountain shall be made low. The rough places will be made plain, and the crooked places will be made straight. And the glory of the Lord shall be revealed, and all flesh shall see it together. This is our hope. This is a faith that I go back to the South with. With this faith, we will be able to hew out of the mountain of despair a stone of hope. With this faith, we will be able to transform the jangling discords of our nation into a beautiful symphony of brotherhood. With this faith, we will be able to work together, to pray together, to struggle together, to go to jail together, to stand up for freedom together, knowing that we will be free one day. This will be the day. This will be the day when all of God's children will be able to sing with new meaning, "My country, tears of thee. Sweet land of liberty, of thee I sing. Land where my fathers died, land of the pilgrim's pride. From every mountainside, let freedom ring. And if America is to be a great nation, this must become true. And so let freedom ring from the prodigious hilltops of New Hampshire. Let freedom ring from the mighty mountains of New York. Let freedom ring from the heightening Alleghanies of Pennsylvania. Let freedom ring from the snow-capped Rockies of Colorado. Let freedom ring from the curvaceous slopes of California. Not only that, let freedom ring from Stone Mountain of Georgia. Let freedom ring from Lookout Mountain of Tennessee. Let freedom ring from every hill and molehill of Mississippi, from every mountainside. Let freedom ring, and when this happens, when we allow freedom ring, when we let it ring from every village and every hamlet, from every state and every city, we will be able to speed up that day when all of God's black men and white men, Jews and Gentiles, Protestants and Catholics will be able to join hands and sing in the words of the old Negro spiritual. Free at last, free at last. Thank God Almighty, we are free at last.
Okay, so let's talk about this for a little bit. The questions, in a response to the questions that were asked earlier that we asked you to look for and plan to respond to. First, let's go with them one by one. First of all, the question was, after 50 years, after the speech about I Have a Dream at the Lincoln Memorial, are we as a society facing any injustice?
I think the answer for me would be clearly yes. We continue to see unequal treatment and violence and racism in a variety of forms. It's just very clear.
Okay, thank you, Glenn. Okay, no one else. Let's go to the next question then. What do you think? Oh, I'm sorry. Who do you think needs to hear this message again yet today? Who do you think needs to hear this message yet again today? If anyone. If you don't think anyone does, then share that as well.
This is, I think, until we have justice, we need to hear this message or like messages. And I know, I maybe have my head buried in the sand sometimes, but I remember my reaction last year when, so much started happening again. And I'm like, wow, I thought we were totally past all this. I felt like I was back 40 years or 50 years, however long ago it's been, when we had so much going on. And I was just shocked to know that here we are, we thought we've made so much progress in it. And I didn't realize how many problems we still have. And it almost feels like it's worse than I thought it had been for a number of years. So yeah, it's still a timely message, unfortunately.
Yeah, thank you, Dee. What were the 5 aspects, the 5 key things that you'd like to see happen in his dream?
I think one of them was school.
Schools, equal treatment.
Yeah.
Sons of former slaves and slave owners sitting down at the table of brotherhood.
Mm-hmm.
What about his thinking, Glenn? What about his 4 children?
Judged not by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, moving on. It is one thing to have a dream, because all of us dream dreams. I don't know, can't speak for you folks. I've dreamed oftentimes that I wish I could play the guitar like B.B. King or Santana and so forth. And I really desire to do that. I wish I could do that. However, I don't pick up a guitar. I don't try it. I do nothing about that. So the question is that dream something that we just state? And was the dream of Martin Luther King something he just stated, but did not work towards or live towards? And I think all of us know the answer to that he not only had the dream, he articulated the dream and the passion for the dream, and then he began to live out the dream. He continued to march, and he continued to protest. He continued to subject himself to these types of things that we see in the screen. He continued to be arrested time and time again for doing the right thing. And Congressman John Lewis, mentioned one of his last speeches to a university. He says, "I've been 50 times, been arrested 50 times since I've been in Congress, and chances are I'm going to be arrested again before I die." Because arrest is one thing, standing up for what you believe to be right, because it is right. And as we mentioned earlier, it is never the wrong time to do the right thing. It is always the right time to do the right thing. And sometimes if that results in an arrest, then so be it. King still, again, placed himself in difficult positions, standing up for the right thing. Again, nonviolent protest. And the key thing that we need to identify and talk about here is the beloved community, in that there is justification, and most people would see or find justification in hate because of this behavior, in hate this behavior. But King did not establish or talk about hate or dislike or disdain for those who wrongfully accused him, those who locked him up, those that were abusive to him, but still the love for our fellow brothers and sisters, and that two wrongs do not make a right, and that we need to model the justice and the behavior that we desire from others. Even we have here as where we have a church blown up during a time that kids were in the church worshiping and learning. And these are the 4 children that were killed during the bombing of that church. Again, horrific behavior, but it did not perpetuate hate at all. It perpetuated a deeper commitment to protest, perpetuated the concept that we are not done yet. There's still a long ways to go, and we must continue to march, continue to protest, continue to raise our voice. King fought desperately for, and we see Andrew Young in the back, and we know that Andrew Young's place in the Congress, and in regards to the civil rights movement as well. And King is fighting for fair schools and equal schools, where students are not given material that is outdated and that is raggedy and passed off or thrown away from the majority of schools, but they are treated with equal treatment. King had many conversations with presidents. We see here with President Johnson, and we know that President Johnson was significantly instrumental in bringing forth some laws and rights to people who are marginalized, oppressed, and are needing some equal treatment. During that process, and one of the outcomes of that process is President Johnson signing the bill to grant civil rights to African American folks, people of poverty, and all those populations who are marginalized. And there is the signing of this document, and King receiving an ink pen from President Johnson upon the signing of this document. We are aware that King did receive the Nobel Peace Prize and was the youngest person at that time to ever receive the Nobel Peace Prize. And I would encourage you on your own to go to that speech that King gave when he received the Nobel Peace Prize. The Civil Rights Act of 1964. I'm sorry, I forgot to mention that President Johnson had signed. He was president. They worked so hard for it. And one of the things that President Johnson said in the presence of Dr. King and the mass that were there at the time, in signing it, after you signed it and gave the ink, passing out the ink pens, he made the statement that we shall overcome. And that was a, as you know, as a doctrine of the in the song of the civil rights movement, and that coming from President Johnson at that time was extremely significant uh, for Dr. King and all of those who had worked for the struggle. Again, when we talk about Dr. King not just having the dream, but still continuing the protest and fight for rights. Now, during this time, as you can see in the back, we talk about jobs for all, full employment. He fought for equal pay, fair pay. He fought against and talked about the Vietnam War. There were many people at this time who accused even African American folks who accused King of stepping out of his lane, that he should stick with the civil rights movement and make more accomplishments there. There is still much to be done, rather than begin this conversation regarding Vietnam War and whether it should and should not happen, whether to begin campaigning for the poor, begin campaigning for fair and better jobs for those that need that. They believe that he should stay in his lane. And it was during the time that his protest against Vietnam War that some of the elected officials, including the president or the chairperson for the FBI, began to accuse King as being a communist and plotting against him, even to the point of placing a person who was employed by the FBI under King's roof, or under his, amongst his people, his inner circle, so that that person would feed information to the FBI regarding what King was up to. So some really underlying things occurred with King during this time, during these ongoing protests, when he was one of the least and most popular people in the United States at that time. Again, Andrew Young up front, you see his wife Claretta with him. Ralph Abernathy is in that picture. A number of familiar faces that went on to become very active in what needs to be done for civil rights in the United States. Again, worked hard for the vote, and shows a picture of he and his wife with the vote. Now, this is another example. Went to Tennessee to fight for the rights of the trash collectors. And this is a protest. The trash collectors were on during that time, a protest march, although they're sitting in back of the trash truck, but it was part of a parade. The trucks were moving, but they were not collecting trash. It was part of the protest. And King went down to support that movement for the protest. But he went down upon request to go down to help them out. In fact, the request came from John Lewis in regards to going down to Tennessee. Now, what happens in Tennessee? One Tennessee, he also wants to fight for the poverty, for the poor, helping them to receive better, eligible for various employments, so that they cannot be living poor, but possibly pull themselves up and earn a decent living so that they may live better. I just like this picture. We've already heard the I Have a Dream address, but I just like this picture. It's real interesting. And as Dee had shared with us earlier, there are many people who believe that since we have gotten a African-American president, that we have reached the top of the hill. We have reached the top of the hill. We have reached the peak, and all of this civil rights movement, all of the equalization, all of that is behind us, and it is not an issue any longer. And as Dee had pronounced, when things smack you in the face, like George Floyd and what happened after that, and this heavy hot summer of 2020 and all the things that were going on, when those things smack you in the face, and you recognize honestly that things have not, they have improved, they have changed, they have gotten better. And as John Lewis clearly stated, but there's still a long way to go. And it takes everyone to get there. Here's a few Dr. King quotes again. It takes empathy, patience, compassion to overcome anger, hatred, and resentment. So true.
Mhm.
Image, of course, at the memorial. The mountaintop speech. Now, I'm going to talk a little bit about that. We really aren't going to show that speech or play that speech right now, not in its entirety. But what's important is that for us to know that he gave that mountaintop speech before his assassination. And it's rather unique. He was down in Tennessee, and he was very ill that evening. In fact, he was not going to go to the church where he was scheduled to go. But Ralph Abernathy, who follows him around, who was very good working with him, came to me and said that there's a church full of people. In fact, they're standing in the street waiting to hear from you, waiting to see you. And even a short message, if you could just pull yourself together enough, and we know that you're ill, and come and share with them. And so he did. He did. And it wasn't intended to talk about the mountaintop. You know, in his mountaintop speech, he says, one of the key things, and again, this is his last speech before his assassination. And he says in that speech that I, like any person, desires to live a long life. Long life has its values. But I'm telling you, I'm not afraid of anything now, because I have been to the mountaintop and I've seen the other side. And telling us as a people, we continue to struggle, continue to move towards the right direction, continue in our nonviolent protest and our goals toward equalization, and continue to be together, that we will reach the mountaintop, that we will get there. He is assured of that. And it was kind of a closing speech, if you will. We're not going to play that. Would encourage you to look that up as well. But his last speech before assassination. And so here is Dr. King, again with Reverend Jesse Jackson and Ralph Abernathy. He was outside of his hotel room in Tennessee. And Dr. King, as some of you may know, was a smoker. And he was inside of his room. He decided that he was going to go out on the deck and have a smoke. And he could hardly went any place by himself. And so he went out to the deck and was just ready to have a cigarette, relax for a little bit. And we kind of know what happened after that. And yeah, so pretty dramatic situation here with Dr. King, his assassination, a great uprising for the community, everyone, just a very, very difficult time for everyone.
Vince, I had a question that I don't know if you know this, but I was struck in the image of it looked like an old cart being pulled by two mules that the casket was on. Is there a story behind that or some symbolism intended there?
Only that it is very indicative to the slaves down south and during that time, and before that time, of people being played by people of honor being pulled by a two-mule cart. Yeah.
Thank you.
And this is another one of my favorite that decided that it's to stick with love because hate is too great of a burden to bear.
Mhm.
And that's kind of goes back to the question that I think Glenn asked before we broke for lunch. It goes back to the persistent and urgent question is, what are you doing for others? Or what should we be doing now? I see those under the same umbrella, what Glenn has asked and what Gwen had shared in regards to the book. That's a frequently asked question. And I think the answer lies within our own motivation to seek out the proper response, the proper time, the proper. One of the things that I urge us very much to do, and just yesterday I spoke with the Norwalk schools, and one of the things I would urge them to do and us to do is to be familiar with the history, to be familiar with the different cultures, to understand what the truth is, and that when we are especially interacting with young folks, and you believe that they are getting one version of the historical story, you have an opportunity through your knowledge to introduce to them another version, another more fuller version regarding the role, for example, of African Americans in history and who did what. Simultaneously, when we introduce for example, the Sunday school book to our students for Sunday school, it would be wise for us to flip through and make sure that all cultures are appropriately depicted in that book, because not all books do that. And some books depict certain cultures and certain groups, whether it's females, whether it's males, whether it's an ethnicity, as being the receiving and the getting of from the majority group. And the majority group being the heroic group that is offering up their grace to a minority group. And that is not the constant picture that we want to embed upon our young people, that the minority group is constantly the receiving of the grace of the majority group. And so we need to, and we can take the responsibility of making sure that the literature, the things that we are exposing our children to are valid, are equal, are not depicting a group or a person or an ethnicity in a non-flattering and a judgmental way. So the constant question here from Dr. Martin Luther King, and to us ongoing is, what are you doing for others? Or what are you doing to bring about justice, racial justice, ethnic justice, legal justice to others or to your community yet today? This gets back to the beloved community again. It's back to what we are all about, and what Dr. Martin Luther King is all about, is loving our community and making our community better and stronger through our love. Okay. Uh-huh.
50 years ago today, about 250,000 people marched on the National Mall on Washington to demand change. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. sharing his dream for America from the steps of the Lincoln Memorial. His indelible words, a watershed moment in the civil rights movement. Today, thousands will gather once again to commemorate those now famous words that forever changed our country.
50 years ago, there was so much fear. People are afraid to be afraid. The fear is gone. Our country is better, and we are better people. We still have a distance to go.
That distance front and center today, as the nation's first black president will add his vision as the marquee speaker at the anniversary celebration. President Obama acknowledges that while a lot of progress has been made, King would not be satisfied.
We have not made as much progress as the civil and social progress that we've made, and that it's not enough just to have a black president.
There are renewed calls for addressing socioeconomic and racial disparities. The recent acquittal of George Zimmerman and the shooting death of Trayvon Martin drew many to the streets across the country in protest. The president reacting with personal candor.
There are very few African-American men in this country who haven't had the experience of being followed when they were shopping in a department store. That includes me.
This from a president criticized by some in the black community for not being more outspoken about race.
Yeah, I like to see him be more passionate about race questions.
Last week in New York, Mr. Obama may have given a glimpse into his address today honoring the civil rights leader.
Each generation seems wiser in terms of wanting to treat people fairly and do the right thing and not discriminate. And that's a great victory that we should all be very proud of.
Former Presidents Bill Clinton and Jimmy Carter will be there as well. So will actor Jamie Foxx and media mogul Oprah Winfrey, who credits King for much of her success.
It is because of Dr. King and all those who worked with him that I stand. And because of them, I have a voice that can be heard.
Don Lemon, CNN, Washington.
50 years ago,
60 minutes. 60 minutes. Rewind.
Now what I'm saying is this. I would like for all of us to believe in nonviolence, but I'm here to say tonight that if every Negro in the United States turns against nonviolence, I'm going to stand up as a lone voice and say this is the wrong way.
I will never change in my basic idea that nonviolence is the most potent weapon available to the Negro in his struggle for freedom and justice. I think for the Negro to turn to violence would be both impractical and immoral.
There is an increasingly vocal minority who disagreed totally with your tactics, Dr. King.
There's no doubt about that. I will agree that there is a group in the Negro community advocating violence now. I happen to feel that this group represents a numerical minority. Surveys have revealed this. The vast majority of Negroes still feel that the best way to deal with the dilemma that we face in this country is through nonviolent resistance. And I don't think this vocal group will be able to make a real dent in the Negro community in terms of swaying 22 million Negroes to this particular point of view. And I contend that the cry of black power is at bottom a reaction to the reluctance of white power to make the kind of changes necessary to make justice a reality for the Negro. I think we've got to see that a riot is the language of the unheard. And what is it that America has failed to hear? It has failed to hear that the economic plight of the Negro poor has worsened over the last few years.
How many summers like this one do you imagine that we can expect?
Well, I would say this, we don't have long. The mood of the Negro community now is one of urgency, one of saying that we aren't going to wait, that we've got to have our freedom. We've waited too long. So that I would say that every summer we are going to have this kind of vigorous protest. My hope is that it will be nonviolent. I would hope that we can avoid riots because riots are self-defeating and socially destructive. I would hope that we can avoid riots, but that we will be as militant and as determined next summer and through the winter as we have been this summer. And I think the answer about how long it will take will depend on the federal government, on the city halls of our various cities, and on white America to a large extent. This is where we are at this point, and I think white America will determine how long it will be and which way we go in the future.
Even Senator Jacob Javits asked the question recently. He said that he was a slum resident, but he and some of his fellow Jews were able to make it out of the ghetto on the Lower East Side. The same thing is true with lots of Irish, Italians, And he asked the question why the Negro finds it so difficult to make his way up out of the ghetto.
Well, number one, no other racial group has been a slave on American soil. It's nice to say other people were down and they got up. They were not slaves on American soil. The other thing is that the Negro has had high visibility. And because of the prejudices existing in this country, his color has been against him. It's been against him, and they've used this to keep him from moving up. In the final analysis, when you say to a man that you are in this position because of your race or because of your color, you say to that man that he can never get out of it. Other racial groups have been able maybe to change the accent or change the names, but the Negro can't.
Greetings, everyone. I'm honored to host our celebration today, a very special day when our nation honors the legacy and impact of the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. On such a day, I must start with gratitude. Gratitude to the Reverend King for his legacy of leadership and civil action and his gift of transformative, empowering language. And gratitude to those in our own community, our students, faculty, our staff, alumni, and our civic leaders who dedicate themselves every day to championing diversity in all its forms and promoting the civil community, equality, and respect. Dr. King's words and spirit, his passion for justice, and his incredible deeds continue to inspire us. Reflecting on his legacy feels especially meaningful to me this year. Events unfolding all year call out for our nation to uphold our foundational principles of justice, equality, freedom, and democracy, and to find hope in the humanity we share. Today, we are coming together as community to celebrate his transformative legacy and to reinforce his idea of a beloved community, a truly brotherly society, which Dr. King said in 1966 must be the truest objective we seek in life. Dr. King told us truth matters. Truth matters when we see innocent people fall victim to a virus, injustice, or violence. Truth matters when we talk about elections, wars, climate change. Truth matters when we talk about suffering in our own communities, homelessness, addiction, and mental illness. Dr. King fervently believed the biblical verse that the truth will set us free, free from historic prejudice, from ignorance, and from fear. At our greatest, universities are there to help society identify and elevate truth, to be places where each generation comes to learn and where, as a community, we seek to use our gifts and our knowledge for the good of others. Dr. King came to Los Angeles at least 24 times, including several visits to USC, where he spoke at our Bovard Auditorium. One time, a bomb threat cleared the building. Another time, he told his audience, "I'm a Baptist preacher and I'm in the heart-changing business." The many death threats he received didn't change this. He taught that violence had to be rejected and replaced with love and peace. Over the last year, we've seen resilience much like Dr. King taught. When the pandemic hit, our community came together to offer help where it was most needed. When marchers protested the deaths of George Floyd and others, our community embraced action to confront racial injustice. And just last week, when we saw a violent mob in Washington try to subvert our democracy and intimidate our elected leaders to invalidate our election, they stayed focused on their service to the nation and went ahead and confirmed Joe Biden's Electoral College victory. Through it all, we have witnessed horror and heartbreak, but also heroism and hope. And Dr. King's words, his belief, and his strength will continue to guide us toward the beloved community we seek. Thank you for tuning in today to join our celebration of Dr. King. And a special thanks to today's wonderful speakers and our talented event staff who organized this virtual event. Dr. King's words in his final speech, delivered in Memphis the night before he was assassinated, give us a clear path ahead. He said, "Let us stand with greater determination, and let us move on in these powerful days, these days of challenge to make America what it ought to be." It is now my privilege and pleasure to introduce Los Angeles County Supervisor for the 2nd District, the Honorable Holly Mitchell.
Hi, I'm Supervisor Holly Mitchell, and I'm proud to join the home of the Trojans and the entire USC community in acknowledging and celebrating Martin Luther King Day 2021. This year's King Day celebration comes at a time when we're facing an unprecedented challenge and attacks on our nation's democracy. This is the challenge and the opportunity we have before us, and I trust in the rising leaders at USC who will join us in meeting this moment, currently as students on the campus, and when you leave the safety of your campus and go out into the greater world. So let's honor Dr. King's legacy by continuing to fight on. Let's remain vigilant about ending the dual pandemics of COVID-19 and systemic racism. Let's fight on with kindness to each other and service to our community. Thank you and happy King Day.
Good morning and happy Martin Luther King Day to all you Trojans who are tuning in. My name is Pedro Noguera. I'm the Dean of the Rossier School of Education, and it's my privilege to say a few words about the significance of this day. I want to start by posing a question. Why do we honor this individual in the first place? After all, we don't even honor Presidents Lincoln or Washington anymore with their own day.
Okay.
Toward it.
I want to.
I wish you all the very best. And I
want for us to answer that question. That's one of my closing questions that we have here, but this is an appropriate time to do that. So, Dr. Martin Luther King Day. First of all, it was a struggle, even though it was passed by Congress. It was a struggle to get all of the states on board with that. At last, they finally are. But why do we honor Dr. Martin Luther King or have a Dr. Martin Luther King Day?
My understanding when it started, as they were saying then, it wasn't supposed to be a day off, but it was supposed to be a day on, that you were supposed to give that day in service to whatever organization you felt so led in your community.
Excellent. Very, very true. Thank you for sharing that. Many of the schools throughout the country did not have class or did not have their typical routine on that day, but they planned a day of service because that was the goal. I do know that there were organizations in town, businesses, who gave their employees time off for the purpose of them to go to a nonprofit and to commit and do a day of service. Unfortunately, I think many people have forgotten that and utilized that day, Martin Luther King Day, as simply a day off. No work, no whatever, scheduling a day to shop, sleep in, and do some other things. I think we very much are in need of remembering that, and for many more of our people to be of service to others on that day at that time. Any other comments, any other thoughts about why we should have Martin Luther King Day?
Very early on taught us the importance of knowing Black history, knowing the legacies of those who came before us, and understanding the role Black Americans have played. And as I've gotten older, my understanding of the holiday and of Martin Luther King Jr. has increased as I've learned more about the movement and the people that were in his orbit, and how there were multiple organizations fighting for Black liberation who were advocating for different strategies at the same time. It's been really illuminating for me to understand how many different forms activism can take on and how many different people play a role. And to learn about people who were in Martin Luther King Jr.'s orbit, like Bayard Rustin, who was a Black gay man, who later went on to fight for gay rights as well as Black liberation. Like Nina Simone, who was an artist and a musician who decreased her musical output as her activism grew. Like Coretta Scott King, his wife, you know, who played such a role in allowing him to be able to do the work that he was doing. As I've learned more about these people, the holiday has taken on more significance for me, and just understanding how it takes perseverance and patience and dedication and coalition building to make change. It takes so many people to make change. And often it's so unpopular during the time. To get older and learn that in his era, Martin Luther King Jr. was very unpopular. And it took dedicated work and activism from his peers and the people who loved him to get a holiday for him and to get us to the point today where we recognize that his contributions were so important. That's really eye-opening for me. Just to know that activism is often unpopular in the moment, but when you're on the right side of history, it will always come to light. So Martin Luther King Jr. Day, his life and his legacy has taught me a lot of valuable lessons that I'm very thankful for as a young Black woman who wants to advocate for equity and social justice. So I'm very thankful for the holiday. I hope people take this time to reflect. And I'm grateful for everything that the people who fought during the Civil Rights Movement, everything that they sacrificed and everything that they accomplished. Thanks. Fight on.
Hello, Trojan family. On behalf of USC Dornsive, I am honored to provide remarks on this day as we celebrate Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s birthday. Last year, along with members of the Los Angeles community, I visited Selma and Montgomery. We were there on the occasion of the 55th anniversary of the March from Selma to Montgomery. Beginning with the bus boycott in 1955 and later with the March from Selma to Montgomery for the right to vote, Montgomery was the epicenter of the civil rights movement. The very streets, buildings, and bridges that we visited were symbols of the movement. Echoing through these structures were stories of some of our citizens' greatest trials and triumphs. This was a trip that was particularly important to me, even though I was born and raised here in California. My parents were born and raised in Alabama, so I guess you could say I have Alabama roots. As Dr. King talked about the fierce urgency of now in his I Have a Dream speech, I don't have to remind any of you that now is the time for us to reflect upon all that he stood for. I can't think of a greater way than to say thank you to Dr. Martin Luther King for all that he did for my freedom and for justice for all, than to celebrate his legacy and to live the dream to the best of my ability. Happy King Day, Trojan family, and continue to fight on.
Okay, thank you. We're going to just stop that video here and close with this question to you. The same thing. How do you, and moving forward, how do you, and we want to make it personal, and then I'm going to ask in regards to your community. And you can identify your community, whether it's your congregation, your church, your workplace, or whatever. How can you celebrate the legacy of Dr. Martin Luther King? And I would like, and I've not really been very forceful about this, but I would like, we have 13 to 12 people on, I would like to have 12 responses in regards to how you will and can make the legacy of Dr. Martin Luther King live on. How can you in your community create a beloved community, a beloved atmosphere, the legacy of Dr. Martin Luther King?
I guess I can go first, Vince. I think today's maybe an example of one of the things we can do. Remembering and rehearsing and learning are all very important parts of being able to honor someone's legacy. And so I think this is a first step. But I just spent the last week, for example, participating in the writers' workshop for Community of Christ. And this, is a good reminder that we have the opportunity whenever we create worship materials or study materials or write a sermon for use in our congregation or prepare a worship service, that we have an opportunity to incorporate, particularly in this time when the church is focusing on nonviolence, but always we have an opportunity to pay attention to including the really prophetic teachings of Dr. King in various aspects of what we do. The World Conference, of course, adopted Racial Justice Day as one time in which we very specifically and intentionally focus every year on this. And certainly I think all of us could make a commitment to that and to being certain that what we do in our congregations is a part of it. And I guess there's a personal dimension of it for me too, and that is really trying to follow up on Gwen's suggestion of reading the Healing Resistance book. During the break, I downloaded it and got it on my Kindle reader, so I'll be able to read that. But I think that's probably an important step as well, is just understanding more about the Kingian nonviolence philosophy and how we can bring that to bear in our own lives.
Thank you, Glenn.
And now it's others' turn.
Others, yes.
I guess I can share some thoughts as we've gone along today through the workshop. I don't know if the other mission centers are having programs like we've had in ours related to diversity and inclusiveness. But I agree with Glenn. I think that's a really good first step. And just learning and becoming more aware of issues that are systemic, that need solutions. I've also been aware of the World Church also providing these kinds of workshops on diversity and inclusiveness, and I think that too is a good step forward. I was asked to plan the opening worship service for the Mission Center reunion this year, and the theme was Grow Peace Here. And when I first received that assignment, I thought it would be quite easy. And I was instantly thinking of a children's moment that could be written and developed about planting the seeds of peace. And those would be seeds like kindness and caring, as opposed to seeds that would cause weeds to grow and thorns to grow, that kind of thing. And I had to set that children's moment aside in the interest of time for the service. And so the next idea that was presented in the worship helps for that service was a story by Howard Thurman, a story of nonviolence, where a Black woman grew her own vegetables and flowers, and the next door neighbor, who was a white lady, was very racist and tried to kill off all the vegetables and flowers that this lady was trying to grow by dumping chicken manure on it every night. And the Black woman, instead of reacting, in a violent way, decided to get out her cultivator and cultivate the manure into the dirt And as a result, the most beautiful flowers bloomed. And so as part of this focus moment that I had to set aside, I'd gone to Walmart and purchased some artificial flowers and this little cultivator tool that I call like a play cultivator. It cost a whole 94 cents. So you can imagine what quality cultivator this was. But it became in my mind a tool that I could remember and hang on to as a tool to use for nonviolent responses to situations that normally would cause the response of anger or frustration. And so I just have that image of that cultivator going with me, and I feel like I should hang that little 94-cent cultivator from the mirror in my car so that every time I see it, I'm reminded that we are to be the cultivators of peace. And as I was planning that worship service, I realized that growing peace was actually very difficult. And it was going to require moments of confession and repentance on our part. I began to realize that it was just going to be a lot of work to use that cultivator all the time when we wanted to respond with anger. So today I've been kind of listening for some tools that we could use for nonviolence in our own personal lives and in our congregations. And because of the workshops that we had at the Mission Center and at the World Church level, I've become aware that nonviolence could be taught at a very early age. And so these comments are kind of in support of what Francis was sharing earlier in our workshop about our Sunday school curriculum. And I would suggest that it even needs to begin at the nursery level. She suggested maybe with older kids, but I would suggest even in the nursery, there's so much non-verbal communication happening with the toys and the books that are in the nursery area, as well as the curriculum that's being developed for the kids. And so I think we have tools of nonviolence that we can use that would help even in the nursery and the Sunday school classrooms in our churches. So I'm a little intimidated by getting involved in the political process or the larger social issues that have been suggested today, such as the police brutality of Black people and the voting rights, and that those are a little bit intimidating for me and over my head, although I do support the efforts to participate in those kinds of endeavors. But what I can do in my little corner of the world is to make sure that, like Vince said, all cultures are represented in our materials that we have for worship and for kids and even the little kids. So today I feel like I've learned a lot more about tools that can be used to help us in our approach to nonviolence. So I guess in my simple mind, the way my mind works, I'll sum it up with this phrase: keep calm and cultivate. Thank you.
Thank you, Marilyn. Very good. Thank you. Anyone else? We have a few more to go. Anyone else? Jump right in.
This is Barbara, and can you hear me all right?
I can hear you, Barbara.
Okay, thank you. I just have to check. My technology is way down there on the lower scale of things. So I'm glad you're hearing this. I'm a long ago retired school teacher, so I do not have access to children that in that way anymore. And I'm thinking that what I'm currently involved in more than anything else is the um, adult situation of Lamoni congregation. So my best answer to this might be just that the next time I have responsibility for leading our Wednesday evening prayer service, we call it prayer and share. I could talk about this with the adults and just let them know that as it has occurred to me in the recent minutes here, that we're separating, we're focusing this on one day of the year, which is what we often do with our calendar days and our special days. So every day should be a day of remembering how we overcome things that have been shown to us by Martin Luther King Jr. and all of the people that he has learned from as well. And so I guess I'm just trying to say, and not very well, but I'm trying to say that we celebrate Christmas once a year. We celebrate Easter once a year. We celebrate any 4th of July when it comes around. But every day of every month should be something that we remember the things we're trying to accomplish in learning as we go forward. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Barbara. Well said, well spoken. Appreciate that. Francis, you were going to talk?
Did you say me, Francis?
Yes, yeah.
I didn't know how you knew that, but I've shared with others before as a teacher. When I taught first grade, Martin Luther King was part of our curriculum, and I enjoyed I enjoyed teaching about him because of my value of the worth of all persons and how important the movement is. But I also had some apprehension about teaching 5 and 6 and 7-year-olds about the fact that there was a time where the color of skin made a difference in how people were treated. It felt like some of them maybe didn't know that. It felt strange to teach that at that age. And so now as a preschool teacher where they're even younger, I, instead of teaching so much that, I do try and teach about kindness, and we do talk about the beautiful diversity of skin colors, and I try to show that and be mindful of the books that I pick all year long, not just for Black History Month. I try to find books to show kids all year long. But when I mentioned the part about church curriculum for senior high in particular, I guess I was echoing, or what made me think that was, as I said, I didn't know who Reverend Lawson was. And although in college and otherwise I had learned about Martin Luther King, Malcolm X, and Gandhi, and felt like I had background there, I realized there's so much missing from my knowledge bank. And so I guess to your point about how can we honor Martin Luther King Day, I guess I want to commit to delving deeper into the history of the peacemakers in particular, the way that Reverend Lawson was talking about, because that really gave me goosebumps. And if I have the opportunity to try and influence kids, teenagers that have the capacity to maybe think a little deeper about what happens next, as well as understanding the history part of it, which I think is important. I want to be able to do that with more integrity, to have more knowledge, deeper knowledge about the movement as we move forward, in particular in Community of Christ, of trying to understand what our call to be a nonviolent people is about.
Good. Well, thank you very much, Francis. I would take this time while other people are waiting to share their thoughts, to share with you and encourage you to also look up on YouTube Reverend James Lawson's conversation with James Earl Ray, the assassinator, the accused assassinator of Dr. Martin Luther King, and his relationship with James Earl Ray, even after his incarceration. It's incredible. And talking about forgiveness and talking about love of people and so forth. That is a great story. It's only like 10, 15 minutes long, but Dr. Lawson does a good job of explaining to others, to the listeners in, about why and how and what he did with that relationship with James Earl Ray.
Thank you. Thank you for the recommendation.
Vince, in the chat from Steph, she responded by saying, I want to learn as much as I can from as many points of view as I can, so I can be as welcoming as I can while working with my students at school. I want to constantly get better and help students share their voices.
Very nice, great. Thank you for sharing. Thanks for reading that, Glenn. I cannot see the chat, so thanks for reading that.
The reminder that Martin Luther Jr. Day is meant for service. I'm sure I've heard that before, but to be more aware of that part of the celebration in that day. And I have a few months to figure out what I want to do on that day of service. Also, the book Healing Resistance has got my attention. The word healing and the word resistant together intrigues me, and I don't think I've really put them together in my own mind and heart. There's a couple things from participants. One was to use a gentle voice, but not be silent, such as saying, that has not been my experience, and then go on with whatever you want to share about your own experience or your own beliefs. My tendency is to avoid conflict of all kinds, and that got my attention. And the last comment that will live on in my heart and mind from here on was from Marilyn, which is the keep calm and cultivate.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you very much, Sherry.
This is Dee. Mine is real simple. I too appreciated the reminder about what the Martin Luther King Day originally was with service. When that was mentioned, I kind of had some memories come back to me about that, but I honestly had forgotten that that was a part of it many, many years ago. And the other thing is, which was kind of mentioned just a minute ago, being more willing to speak out when I see things that are unjust and are not right, sometimes it's easy for me to just be quiet, and I need to be able to do that same thing, to be able to stand up for what's right when you see injustices being done.
Thank you, Dean. But I would insert here that be safe. We need to be safe. And when we had earlier someone says, I do not want to start conflict, and we don't necessarily want to start conflict. And simply saying that is not my experience. If they want to inquire deeper, then they will. And that's not starting a conflict. But that's true in regards to seeking peace. We really don't want to engage in an argument with anyone about that. It does not benefit anybody. And I appreciate your and everyone's remarks regarding that. Not a sturdy person, very reluctant to push against the grain. But sometimes opportunity presents itself. And I think if opportunity presents itself and you are stirred to do such, to make a comment, to say a word, to stand up for those that are oppressed, and sometimes to do rather than just say, then I think we should capitalize on that. Read our gut. If our gut says it's dangerous, follow our gut. If our gut says we really should raise our voice, then follow your gut. Others? Although I don't think we have 12, I'm going to go with one more, and then I'm going to go to our closing. So I want to have one more. Can we get one more?
Yeah, this is Ron. I really appreciate the work that you put into this presentation, and I'm looking forward to looking at the recording again, because a lot of things went by so fast I couldn't get them in. But my thinking is that learning about a life like Martin Luther King is important, but the most important thing is how you're going to put that into your own life. And I'm always, I don't know what the word is, but it's very hard for me to find out what issues there are in our community that need to be challenged, and how to go about challenging those cultures. And so I guess what I would like to commit myself to is to be more vigilant in knowing where you need to respond to injustices, inequalities, and that sort of thing. So just staying in your home and not listening to news, not having a newspaper, not, those kind of things limits us on what we can do. So we need to be more challenged to find those areas that can be challenged and to get us involved in meeting those so that they can be solved, or at least brought to the community's attention.
Very good, Ron. Thank you very much. Thank you. In preparing to close, I would share with you that Ron kind of alluded to that in regards to opening our world a little bit larger, in that it's very easy for most of us to spend the day after day getting up in the morning, getting prepared to go to work or location, going to our garage, getting to our vehicle, driving the same route every day to our place of employment. We socialize with the same people at the place of employment. We get into our vehicle and we drive the same route back home and start the routine over and over again every day. And we wonder why our table does not involve more people. We wonder why our cultures are very limited, and because we are walking the same path all the time. I would invite us and encourage us to deviate, to periodically do the word that's called pivot. And people use that word a lot lately, and do something different that takes you someplace different. And sometimes our perspective of our surroundings will be different than what it was if we do the same thing every day. I would say it would be more well-rounded. You may find that you would bump into a person or a culture or a circumstance that offers an opportunity for your service, your knowledge, your experiences to be shared. And sometimes we can purposely embed ourselves into that culture. Example being, I'm going to step outside my umbrella and go serve at a soup line, at a homeless shelter, at a program in the inner city that I've heard about, but I've never been there before. So if we want to make a difference, we cannot necessarily do that by doing the same thing, the same people, in the same way all the time. I would encourage us and invite us to periodically step outside of our bubble and experience new aspects of the world, and new opportunities may and usually will open themselves up to us all. In closing, I would like to share with you this last video regarding the "We Shall Overcome." What does that mean? Why is that important? And why aren't we singing that even more lately? I know that in our church, sometimes we do sing that. I don't know if it's in our new hymnal. Glenn, is it? Probably not.
Yes, it is actually.
Okay, excellent, excellent. I know we have our new hymnal. We have several songs that were included in the Negro National Anthem that were a part of the civil rights movement. And again, I praise our church for that. But I'd like for us to listen to this video right now. And there are some videos that go along with it. And we'll do a final closing, and Glenn will close us out after this video.
We shall overcome. Deep in my heart, I do believe we shall overcome. Though I join hands so often with students and others behind jail bars singing it, we shall overcome. Sometimes we've had tears in our eyes when we joined together to sing it, but we still decided to sing it. We shall overcome. No, before this victory is won, some will have to get thrown in jail some more, but we shall overcome. Don't worry about us. Before the victory is won, some of us will lose jobs, but we shall overcome. Before the victory is won, even some will have to face physical death. But if physical death is the price that some must pay to free their children from a permanent psychological death, then nothing shall be more redemptive. We shall overcome. Before the victory is won, some will be misunderstood and called bad names and dismissed as rabble-rousers and agitators, but we shall overcome. And I'll tell you why. We shall overcome because the arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends toward justice. We shall overcome because Carlyle is right. No lie can live forever. We shall overcome because William Cullen Bryant is right. Truth crushed to earth will rise again. We shall overcome because James Russell Lowell is right. Truth forever on the scaffold, wrong forever on the throne. Yet that scaffold sways the future. Behind the dim unknown standeth God within the shadow, keeping watch above his own. We shall overcome because the Bible is right. You shall reap what you sow. We shall overcome. Deep in my heart, I do believe we shall overcome. And with this faith, we will go out and adjourn the councils of despair and bring new light into the dark chambers of pessimism. And we will be able to rise from the fatigue of despair to the buoyancy of hope. And this will be a great America. We will be the participants in making it so. And so as I leave you this evening, I say, walk together, children. Don't you get weary. There's a great camp meeting in the Parliament.
I thank you folks for your time together with us. And I look forward to you making a significant difference in your community in the future and living out the words and the life of Dr. Martin Luther King as we work towards building a beloved community. Glenn?
Thank you so much, Vince. What a fantastic day and an opportunity to dwell in remembrance and reflection of the teachings of Dr. King. And thank you so much for bringing in the connection to Community of Christ and Dr. Lawson, and of course your own experiences that you shared, so much more. It's very meaningful. And I couldn't help but be impressed as you replayed the video of the I Have a Dream speech, and realizing that the dream that he shared culminated with the vision of Isaiah. Every valley shall be exalted, every mountain should be made low. And that dream is a dream essentially that one is shared by Community of Christ, a dream of Zion. And these are not parallel dreams. These are the same dreams as seen from different perspectives. And so I'd like to close us with a word of blessing from the Doctrine and Covenants, section 165. Beloved Community of Christ, do not just speak and sing of Zion. Live, love, and share as Zion, those who strive to be visibly one in Christ, among whom there are no poor or oppressed, as Christ's body, lovingly and patiently bear the weight of criticism from those who hesitate to respond to the divine vision of human worth and equality in Christ. This burden and blessing is yours for divine purposes. And always remember, the way of suffering love that leads to the cross also leads to resurrection and everlasting life in Christ's eternal community of oneness and peace. Trust in this promise. Thank you.
Thank you, Glenn. Have a great day, folks.